All right, welcome back. This is episode 3 of Figuring It Out. Today, I have a friend and guy I work with, Sean Hathaway. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, everyone.
And today what I'm going to be doing is asking Sean about his life from where he grew up to what he did in his early career and to where he's at today as a successful home inspector. So Sean, we were talking earlier before this. Tell everyone a little bit about where you grew up and what it was like kind of growing up in Ohio, moving around from school to school, and how that affected you.
Yeah, so like we were talking earlier, I'm originally from like Northeast Ohio, Akron area. We kind of settled in Akron around like third grade. We'd bounce around quite a bit. So my parents divorced pretty young. My dad actually got into an accident when I was 4, and he got addicted to the pain meds. And so kind of spiraled from there. A lot of bouncing around, different houses, different rental properties. We actually inherited one of my grandmother's homes in Akron, and that's how my mom and my brother ended up there around third grade. So,
and do you think that helped you out socially, switching around that much, or was it kind of hard for you to adjust to new school?
I don't know. I think today I'm very much a person. Like, I have no problem. I can go up on stage, talk to people. But if I go to like an event, I kind of just observe. And I think it's probably from that like time period, because so many new environments, I had just sit back and watch and then like kind of find my place.
And you're like, okay, I could fit in there.
Yeah.
So when you think back to that time period, you're the first person who I've actually had on the show that also grew up in Northeast Ohio with me. How do you think growing up here affected your ability to take risk and like start a business? Do you think it helped, or do you think you had a hindrance where you had to kind of see the world first?
Oh, I definitely had to see more that was out there. Yeah. Akron's very blue collar. It's a former, industry, the rubber capital of the world, right? So even the neighborhood I live in now was a home that was built for Goodyear executives, so a lot of history there as far as that goes. But, you like growing up in Akron or Cleveland, really, you went to work, you came home, you had like a factory job, blue collar job. And so it wasn't until I started meeting more people, read some books, listened to some podcasts, and I was like, wow, there's like a lot more that I could be doing.
Yeah. When I heard the stat that it was like up until the age of 7, your brain basically understands what opportunity is around you. So when you think back to before age 7, who was the most successful person that you knew or could even look up to, or were there not many?
I had my grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah, he was very successful at Goodyear. So
okay, so he was kind of your first example of like, oh, that's what success can look like.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I think I have a lot of friends who will honestly probably be listening to this, where I think a lot of people growing up here, they want to get the safe job. Oh, yeah. And there's no perspective of, does this even actually get me the life quality I want? Does this get me any of the other things? So,
well, I spent 15 years in law enforcement. So you want to talk about playing it safe and like that whole mindset that comes with that. That's most of like the people in public service, like that I worked with.
Yeah. And so we'll kind of talk to your background, because I think that's a very interesting point of who you are personally. And I know you haven't talked much about it, but when you were my age, so thinking mid-20s, did you ever see yourself where you're at today?
No, definitely not. I think I was having like my midlife crisis a little early, if you will. I knew I wanted to go to college, follow in the footsteps of my grandfather, who was at Goodyear, and so I went to Kent State for finance, but I also chose to join the Marines in the reserves, thinking that, okay, I can serve my country. The high school I went to had an ROTC program. I knew I wanted to go and join the military, but I also wanted to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather in business. So I figured I'll just do both. So the problem was, that was June of 2002. We had 9/11.
Yeah.
9 months prior. And, most of my time, or the majority of my time in the reserves was spent active. So come home, my dad went back to prison again. I let him live with some friends of mine, and he relapsed, stole some rent money, things of that nature. And I decided after Iraq, after that happened, that I was going to go the complete opposite path of him. So I went from finance major to Marine to not finishing my degree and getting into law enforcement to finishing my degree while working full-time in law enforcement, but in legal studies because I wanted to become a lawyer, to being a home inspector and real estate investor.
So what was it? I guess I'm curious because I think I had my first day of preschool on 9/11. Obviously, you were older than I was. Like, was that a moment where you felt like I want to protect this country more, or was it kind of something you were thrown into because of the time of when you were in the reserves?
I knew at that time, I think I'd already committed to joining the Marines.
Okay.
And so I was in history class. I remember very specifically the teacher put on like the TV, like tube TV on a cart, brought it in, and we just watched some of the coverage. And I knew kind of at that point, like, okay, it really solidified like my choice to join the military.
Yeah.
But it was also, I mean, like equal parts exciting and equal parts like terrifying, because you knew at that point, like, at least maybe not like that moment, but within the coming weeks, the aftermath of like what happened, that it was probably going to completely change my
like you weren't going to be security at a hotel or something.
Correct.
Yeah, it was going to be a little more intense.
Yeah.
And so with that, you're getting that experience. You're kind of seeing what I would call real risk for the first time. Are you dealing with a lot of the home drama while you're over there? Or was it kind of like that was your first escape from the world you grew up in?
So at that point, like the only like escape, like you said, was, I mean, really just like traveling with family. Like I hadn't had much exposure to anything else. And the Marines was definitely my first exposure to different people, different cultures. I mean, the neighborhood I grew up in Akron, it was very mixed. It was like half black, half white. So I'd seen like that.
Yeah.
But, in the Marines, I mean, we had people from Oklahoma, people from Alaska, people from Florida, people from the West Coast, and like all these different like cultures, even in the US, there's like so many differences based on region. And it was pretty eye-opening to me, because I think it was a good precursor to law enforcement, just in the sense of like, we had to learn to work with so many different types of people, different backgrounds, different economic, like socioeconomic status. But it was definitely like eye-opening from the sense of like, okay, there's like a lot more to life, like outside of just Northeast Ohio.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that trap where grandpa did it, my dad did it, I did it, and why even go explore the rest of the world? So were you one of the first in your close family to kind of get that worldly perspective?
My grandfather traveled a lot for Goodyear.
Yeah.
So
work travel.
Work travel. He was very high up the food chain, like president of international sales. So he did quite a bit of travel, but he was like a father figure to me. And so he was very much like, he would travel, come home, and just want to spend time with us.
Yeah.
Like quality time, not talking about like, oh, well, hey, I did this and this and this, and I saw this things. I mean, he was like very humble.
Yeah.
And so even though he did really well, they still lived in the same 1,500 square foot ranch in Uniontown for 40 years. They were never flashy, anything like that. And so I think, having that exposure, like, I mean, it was, in my generation at least, like in my immediate family, the first like real exposure to different cultures and people and all that. And
so obviously when you're over there, you're getting that experience. Why did you decide not to just stay in the Marines for 30, 40 years?
My daughter.
Okay.
So my oldest is 16. She'll be 17. And she was born 2007. So about a year after I got back from Iraq. And I knew if I re-enlisted, that I was going to get deployed to Afghanistan, and I couldn't leave family.
Is that a hard thing? Obviously, I'm not a parent yet for anyone watching, but do you think that whether you're a business owner or not, once kids are in the equation, does it change how you think about most decisions?
Your whole life changes. Yeah. I mean, but I would say for the better. I mean, it definitely like it grounds you, and that doesn't mean that you can't still like enjoy life.
Yeah.
Travel, go to concerts, sporting events, whatever. I mean, we still, my wife and I, we still do all of that.
Yeah.
But it certainly, changes. It's a lot easier to say, hey, sweetheart, let's go to, I don't know, Nashville for the weekend. It's a lot easier to do that with kids than
Yeah, you got to get the little kids on board. And so there's a couple ways I want to ask you this, but so with the kids in the equation, you went the police officer route, correct?
I did.
And looking back on this, was that more risky, less risky, or what was your experience making that transition from active Marines to then police force? And where did you start your police force?
So it was kind of a winding road to get there. I'd applied at a couple different agencies, like shortly after getting back from Iraq. And during that time when I decided that I wanted to get into police work, it was right before like 2008 when we had the huge economic downturn. So I was working, I was working in security. I was doing commercial and like residential electric, but like just as a basic labor at that point. So I didn't finish my degree. So I didn't have any like real good skills. So I was working like $10 an hour jobs and, working 40, 50 hours a week. And then when I went through the hiring process with one of the local departments, they said I failed the polygraph. And I was like crushed because I didn't lie on it. And of course I then did a ton of research and found that they're very, very subjective based on who is, giving the test, all of that. And so I like kind of had a decision. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I was really banking on this, like for my family. And
did you still have the other jobs or did you quit those?
I was still working, like,
okay.
Yeah. So what I ended up doing was putting myself through the police academy. At the time, it was the Summit County Sheriff's Office, and they had a part-time academy. So I was working 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then going to class from like 5:30 to 9:30, Monday through Friday, for like 9 months to get. It ultimately ended in a position like being offered a job with Summit County, which I was then laid off for shortly after that. But
so with all these changes, I mean, I'm learning a lot about you right now. With all these changes, why? Because a lot of people, they might actually finish something like college, or they might just stay in that job as long as they can. Like, how did you decide, okay, it's okay for me to step away from all these things and keep trying the next? Because that's like the theme I keep hearing here.
I think at the time, it was a fairly like law enforcement, military to law enforcement is a fairly easy transition. I liked the structure. The benefits are always great with a public position like that. My thought of, aside from wanting to, like the biggest factor in that really was like my dad. Like I wanted to go in the complete opposite path of him. And so I had the resolve at the time, like, I don't care what happens, I want to make sure this happens. And during my time in the Marines, I also learned that like finance, business, all that was an interest to me, but I hadn't really done anything on the entrepreneurial side. And so my concept of that whole like side of, of life was basically go to work and sit behind a desk and like run numbers and, had no idea like what actually being an entrepreneur was.
You just kind of imagined an Excel sheet or something in your head.
Yeah. And I was like, there's no way after doing all this crazy stuff in the Marines and then like doing some other things that I could imagine sitting behind a desk. So I was like, all right, we're just going to go all in, and see what happens.
So you seem like the type of guy, there's always, they say 2 types of motivators. There's people that seek pleasure and people that avoid pain. You seem like a guy that's definitely like, I want to avoid pain. I don't want to do what my dad did.
Yeah.
And so even if like how you're talking about, I didn't want to do the desk job, it wasn't like that was a bad option. It was just like, I can't go through the pain of how boring that is after all this interesting stuff I did.
That's true. And that I think was probably to my detriment, like for a long time, because it keeps you in a comfort zone. And, I've learned just reading and just through life, like people will go to great lengths to avoid pain. Like you said, they will go to much greater lengths to avoid pain or uncomfort than they will to, like you said, pleasure or like be successful.
How did you, so obviously that muscle was there. You were doing that. You just weren't reaping the rewards of it. What was the first time where you maybe didn't feel crazy for thinking that way? Where you're like, oh, I got a spark of this success. Like I need to do more of this.
I think, I really think it was like when I first started Frontline.
And what year was that?
That was 2018.
Okay, and for anyone listening, like I don't know many people that think, "Oh, I'm going to start a home inspection company." How did you even make that decision? Was it just, "Oh, I had some electric experience"? Like, why did you start being a home inspector?
So I was actually I started at Summit County, but I ended up at Macedonia. That's where I spent the most of my career in police work, and we were on 12-hour shifts, so I had a lot of free time. We only worked half the year, basically. You're only working 3 days a week, right? Similar like a nursing type schedule. So one of my friends was working part-time at a home inspection company and asked me if I wanted, a part-time job to make some extra money. And went out with them. I stayed with that company for maybe about a year. Very successful company, but I learned through that a couple of things. One, I thought I could do better than they were. And two, I was very much overworking for other people. I wanted the control, like to be able to kind of control my own destiny on things. So I left and talked to one of my coworkers at Macedonia into, this great idea of like starting a home inspection company and be the perfect part-time side job, won't be that much work, all that. Very quickly learned that I did like working for myself, and also that I was very wrong that I could just start this business and be as successful or better than this other company. So, but yeah, like once we got a little bit of business, I was like, okay, like this is interesting.
And you're still you have your police job at the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So what were those shifts like where you're like, ooh, and what was your first financial win? What did you make, like a couple $100 doing an inspection, and you're doing the math of like, how many hours is this in a car? Like, how did you think about that?
I think it was our first or second month. The money was decent. Like, yeah, you saw like what the inspection fee was. And I'm like, all right, I can go work a side job doing like security, at a football game. And that's something that is very common with law enforcement and like fire department, right? But it's like $25 an hour. And so I'd spend my Friday night working at a football game for 3.5 hours, get paid $90 roughly.
Yeah.
I don't have the time with my kids. I don't have, if I want to even go out and have a beer with some friends, didn't have that freedom. And I was doing that for $90. And so when I could do a home inspection and make $400 on my day off at 10 a.m. and be done, and that, do the math like you said, I was like, all right. And then we got, very early on, we got a client that wanted to buy like 40 houses in Ohio. They had sold a business. We're going to use all the money to buy real estate in Ohio. And just timing of when we reached out to a real estate agent, she was like, yeah, actually I do need an inspector, but I need you to do 40 houses over the next like 13 days. And we did everything we could to make sure it happened. And so we had, like 12 grand, like right out of the gate. And so then I was like, wow, okay, we probably need to like treat this more like a business and not.
And did you have an LLC at this point?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so you were set up properly. This wasn't like just you're winging it.
We had our LLC, we had insurance, we had our software picked out, all that. But I mean, 7 years ago, I am like terrified to go look at the reports that we had out from 7 years ago. Just because
house needs work.
Yeah, right. I mean, just like not anywhere near to the quality of work that we're doing now.
Okay, so that was your first big win. So you had that month. You're still a cop at the time. So you've got, okay, we made 12 grand in a very short period of time.
Splitting with a partner at
the
time.
Yeah. And so when you get to this point of, whoa, there is a lot out here, like, are you sleeping at night? Are you just like working on the business and extra hours? Like, what does your life look like? Yeah, no sleep.
No, there was no time. There was very, very little time for sleep. When I first met my now wife a few years ago, she met me like a year or two into, my business, and she was like, I don't know, like how you function. I mean, cause I would like sleep like literally like 2 to 3 hours a day, every day. Like I would go a week and get a total of like 9 hours of sleep for the week.
What was the caffeine consumption looking like?
Oh, you may as well just put an IV.
Sponsored by Red Bull?
Yeah, sponsored by Red Bull, sponsored by Starbucks. So, I mean, it got to the point where I was like I think my brain was like wired. Like if I drove past a Starbucks, I could have like a coffee in my hand and I would still just pull in like out of habit, you know, because my body's like, no, you've only had like 6 pots of coffee today. You need another cup.
So there's a bigger thing here that I find very interesting, that I definitely have those crazy moments too. And I'm grateful to have someone like Katie who gets it. And she knows as long as this isn't a permanent state, that's okay. But to all the people out there that, let's just say they work a job for 60 hours a week, they're only getting paid for 40. Like, looking back, do you have any regrets with how hard you grinded during that period or no?
I don't. You know, I think it was probably necessary for me to like really appreciate things. And now that I've had the chance to meet like a bunch of other entrepreneurs, a bunch of people in business, you know, I almost feel like it's a rite of passage, you know, and it's so funny because you say that, or I say that, but like looking back, especially like now with YouTube and the coaching courses available and technology, you know, you're still probably going to say you're going to start a business and you're still going to put 70, 80 hours a week. And it's so unnecessary. I mean, like there's such a big difference between being like busy and productive, you know? And so in the beginning, you almost have to take those lumps though and like learn, okay, like I just spent 5 hours researching this and I'm never going to implement this. This was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, shiny object syndrome, I think, is a big...
huge.
Yeah, like it's a big killer. And I'm going to give Sean a shout out, everyone. Earlier this year, I had a few propositions come my way. And one of the things Sean warned me about was a lot of entrepreneurs, when they get low, they want to scramble sideways. And you have to be very careful that in those moments, while it's very tempting, to actually just stick to the original plan you have. So one, that's a huge thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Of course. And two is, as you got through that busy phase, how did you, like, was it meeting other people that it turned into the productive phase? Like, what made that switch of like, I'm going to actually sleep maybe 6 hours tonight and I'm going to put a system in place in my company?
I don't know what the exact moment was. Like, there wasn't like a big like aha moment. But I think a lot of it just came from talking to other business owners and figuring out like, you know, it's funny. You probably know, like, especially like if you're in a relationship, you know, you'll know what I'm talking about with this. My wife, my family, my friends, they can tell me something like 37 times and then I'll hear it on a podcast and they're like, I'll come home and tell my wife like, oh my God, you won't believe this. Like, all I have to do is automate this or do this process. And she's like,
yeah, where'd you get that idea?
Where'd you get that idea? Wow. You know,
yeah, so, Katie's fuming over there watching this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I know, I'm sure. And so that like kind of learning how to like stack the like really small like wins, you know, and not bite off like more than you can chew. And it's something that I like still struggle with. You know, I was just meeting with Bruce, who is my lead inspector today, and we've got like this task list that is like 40 items long. And, you know, today I was like, all right, what do you want to work on for 2024? What can we do? And he just looks at me and he's like, can you please help me help you? Like, you've got all these great ideas. Let's like just start checking these off, like, and stay focused, you know? And so that's like really what we're working on going into 24 is, okay, here's our priority list. Just say small incremental wins each day, you know, and the end of the week, end of the month, if you feel like you haven't really done anything, but, you know, 6 months later, you're like, wow, like, I really don't regret like working on like these small wins, you know, each day.
And do you think that's hard? Cause I've always wondered, because I'm the same way. It's very like, I can do anything big picture or hard sales. Like, that's never anything I'll complain about, but there's something about the mundane tasks where it almost scares me. Like I'm a corporate worker at my own company. And I think a lot of us around here, and maybe you can relate or maybe you can't, but I always struggled with delegating things, not because I didn't see the time benefit of it, but there was always this, it's my company, I have to control it. So like, do you suffer with that too? Or where do you think it comes in for you?
Yeah, I mean, some of that certainly, you know, like one thing we're working on now is like our position we call our client care coordinator. I get so frustrated because I'm like, well, when these calls come in and I answer the phone, I'm closing at 95%. Why are you only at 80 or 70? And it's still like great close rate, but, and so that's kind of like what I mean with, to circle back, what we just talked about, like prioritizing things, the real way I should be handling that instead of getting frustrated is, okay, I'm closing at 90, she's closing at 70. Why is there a gap? And then just reviewing, analyzing everything, and just really dialing in the process and making sure that, I'm removed as much as possible so I can do some more of the big picture stuff. But I agree. Like the mundane tasks, one thing I hate is sending out an invoice. I don't know why, because I can't fully automate it on certain, scenarios. It takes literally 45 seconds. And when I have to open QuickBooks, I'm like, I don't want to do this like at all. And I know it's money, hundreds of dollars coming my way. And I still I hate it.
I think the first year, I signed 3 clients on, and I finally delegated that task to Katie. And she looked at the record. She goes, "Why did you not charge people for like the first 2 months?" And I was like, I think I lied to her. I told her it was like a strategy or something. But the reality was I would just not do it because it was fun for me to like do the strategy session, to like see the edits come in. But something about that is hard. And so I guess the next question, to relate it back to your appearance on the blocks, how do you now look at the difference of who Sean was before that show and who does Sean need to be in 10 years if you were to do something like actually sell a company?
Yeah, I mean, the blocks was a great experience. And even like some of the stuff that I've mentioned here in this episode came from, just like lessons learned with that. The biggest takeaway, for those who like don't know what the blocks is, it's a show for entrepreneurs, and it's set up basically like I call it like competitive education is the best way to put it. You learn all this material about entrepreneurship, and then you're immediately tasked with applying it to your business. So, but the way it's taught is like so ingrained. You have a series of videos before you go on the show. It's like 18 hours of videos. Then you get there, and then you'll be given the day's slides the night before. Then you go through the in-person lecture. Then you break out into a group, talk about some things, and then after lunch, you immediately apply what you just learned. So, I mean, you are seeing it, you're watching it, you're hearing it, you're taking notes. Like every step of the learning process is condensed, very like packed in to like a short period, but it really like reinforced everything. And so what was so great about that is like the small wins. Wes Bergman, people know him from reality TV, but what they don't realize is he has a portfolio of businesses through his program, the Alpha Blocks, which is it's an incubator. Everyone's heard of like Y Combinator or some of these other incubators. It's similar. And we're talking like tens of millions of dollars in his portfolio companies. But he never talks about it except to other, people. And his Hollywood friends are like, "Dude, what are you doing, man? Why are you wasting your money on this?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm wasting my money over here."
Yeah.
And they have no idea. But that's like what he was really passionate about. And that show brought me in a room with 75 other business owners from every single walk of life you could imagine. Everything from nonprofit tattoo shops to people who are using AI to do some very crazy, things that are like probably going to change the world.
Yeah.
And seeing that no matter what stage of business you're in, or what actual area of business you're in, we're all facing the same problems, just different kind of like nuances. And so being able to talk to somebody who is running an art studio, and hearing their perspective about like, well, this is what I would do if I had like this kind of issue with this process, or somebody who's in manufacturing saying, "Oh, well, here's how we automated this." And it really like opened up my eyes to more like thinking outside of like society, like not societal, but like industry norms, and taking more of a fresh approach, if the best you can, within the confines of your career field. But like home inspection, you can teach most people how to inspect a house, right?
Yeah.
It's just, how do you deliver that to the client? What is your customer funnel like? What is your sales funnel like? These are all things, honestly, some things that I have been hesitant to dive into because I'm like, well, that really doesn't apply to home inspection. And then I got to the blocks and I was like, wow, okay. I have so much work to do, and that's like the small wins, and then you look back like to this very long-winded answer for your original question. Like,
no, I like it.
10 years from now, my goal is to look back and kind of like what I learned from the blocks, continue making and stacking the small wins every day, every week, every year. And 4, 5, 6, 10 years down the road, I want to be able to look back and be like, wow, like I am completely crushing my competition. And it wasn't because I was like, some overnight success. I got lucky. It was like all the work that went in, like behind the scenes, that gets us to that company where we're at.
Do you think it's hard? Because I have the same resistance. And before this started, I was telling Sean about 2 very big coaching hires that I made for this upcoming year. And transparently, like, while I'm excited for them, they're not things I want to do. And I think, I had a long talk with Katie about why don't I want to do these. And I think the reality that I came to was every time I create a system or I delegate a task, I have to say goodbye to the company that Hustle Alex started.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's this huge kind of relationship with, while I do want a great asset of a company that I could choose to sell one day or hold either way, there's a big part of I have to constantly redefine my role to make sure that the company still is doing its best for everyone we work with. And that's a huge struggle I have. And I'm curious if you felt the same.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that like mindset plays such a big role in that stuff. And, if you have the mindset of like, I have to do everything, right? I Hustle Alex, like you said. Hustle Alex is comfortable because Hustle Alex knows Hustle Alex, and he's what your existence has been since you started the company. Fast forward 5 years, and now like it's hard to, it's almost hard to envision like what truly could be. Like I think there's great potential in your company, but I think that really what it boils down to is so many entrepreneurs. I have no doubt in your success, right? You might doubt your success or where things are going to go. I have other people tell me, you tell me like, dude, you have a great operation. Like, I really think like the sky's the limit. But I question sometimes like, wow, okay, like, are we actually going to get there? And imposter syndrome is very real with entrepreneurs. Like you feel like, okay, everyone's going to figure it out. I'm not actually as good as I am, all these things. Kind of like what you and I talk about. Like when you're trying to get me to do content, which I'm horrible about doing.
Not in 24.
Not in 24, right. It's not that I don't like know, I guess, like what to talk about or every day, like there's a content opportunity. But like what I struggle with is something you get on me all the time about. And that's, well, that's great. Like that, all of these things, but nobody else does. Right. And so I think what's interesting, like really interesting is that, and then you look at like what Hormozy's been doing with, he's taken all of his content and rewriting it at a 3rd grade level. And he's not like saying that a doctor or a lawyer or somebody who has like a very high intellect can't understand what he's saying. It's just so much better consumed at that level. And like, I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurs, like a tough pill to swallow. Like
it's hard because I see it so much in real estate, a lot in the finance mortgage world, that the knowledge someone will have is up here. The person that's going to write money to them, their knowledge is here.
Yeah.
So the biggest challenge I think all of us have is moving this gap down to where, they actually understand it. Because there's times I'm doing strategy calls where I'm telling someone like, hey, the videos of you talking are great, but we need more B-roll. And they're going, who's B-roll?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's background footage to roll over the clip. And so there's these times where even myself, I am speaking to Alex. I'm not speaking to Sean. I'm not speaking to the person who actually needs to hear it. And I think a lot of times with home inspections, I mean, I could walk through a house 10 times and be like, this thing's fine. You're going to go in there and go, okay, that's old wiring. That needs fixed. The ceiling's caving in right there. And I think the harder part is to look out and understand that there actually are people who will watch that. Because there's 3 people that I know that are in the Cleveland area that have worked with you, and they didn't know we worked together. And one of the interesting things one of them said is, oh, I love using Frontline because they always return my calls and I get a follow-up afterwards.
Yep.
And what's crazy is you as Sean are focused on how do I be the best inspector? How do I make sure my inspectors are the best? But the boring shit is what made them actually go, oh, this Frontline guy is worth making a video with.
Yeah.
So I think it's a testament to 2 things. 1, yeah, the systems are worth it and we probably should all be doing it. But 2, the reality is you have a lot to say. And I think we all do. I think that's the reason why I started this podcast is that there's almost like this information dam that gets created. And then trying to shove that through this 60-second video or even an hour-long podcast, it's a very difficult skill to develop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's bridging that gap is something that we've been working like really hard as a company. And that's something that the blocks definitely like helped with. So like customer success, I think we did a clip about that. It's something that we're really focusing on. And I think what's going to be the biggest differentiator with us going forward is we are looking at every step of our funnel to make sure that the clients get immediate value. Like, so the time to value is very big.
Yep.
They schedule on, say, Monday, but the inspection is until Friday. What can we do with that time period to make sure that they're getting value from our company while they're waiting? And then just providing them with so much information at a level they can digest and understand. So when it comes time for the inspection, all my inspectors have to do is show up, just perform well, and then everything goes smooth. The client feels good about the home they're purchasing. The agents feel great about referring us out. And then on the back end, same thing. All of our follow-ups, all of our automations, that's all just designed to make sure that the customer has an experience that they're not going to get with other companies in Ohio.
Yeah, I think that's another hard part for the ego is to actually acknowledge that a lot of other people can do what you can do. Mm-hmm. But the reality is they're not picking those other people because of something you provide. Which, I mean, for us this year, a huge one was just holding a damn camera. That was something I refused to do for a long time. But when I put my mind to what's actually holding everyone I work up with, it's like they can talk to a camera, but to make things immersive, someone actually needs to be there with them.
Yeah.
And a second layer of it, I appreciate the customer success thing because I wondered, some people, they're very up and down. They'll have a couple great months and it's stagnant, then it goes back up again. And one of the things I actually started doing was just interviewing people, even out of state. Like there's a lady in Florida where I just literally will ask her the questions while we're on a Zoom call. And I think those things, they feel stupid when you start doing them, but when you realize that that's what people are giving you positive feedback about, that's where you have to step out of yourself and go, that's actually what I should probably be doubling down on.
So how do you replace Alex, the camera guy?
Just find other camera guys that can hear what I have to say. I think that's step one. I think the second part of it is having a much better system to where I actually understand that I can play director. I think one of the hardest parts about the business I've started is I wanted to be editor first, then I wanted to be copywriter second, then I wanted to be sales guy third, then I wanted to be the brand of the company fourth. And then what I started realizing is while I'm creating a good system, these all need to be their own people. And so I think that's the hard part for me is one, I'm still in a very new business. Media companies have existed forever, but short form is a 2 to 3 year old concept entirely since TikTok. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also just back to what you said originally, I've paid other people who have figured that part out. So today I don't know. I think the answer is find others that can do what I can do and be able to provide the knowledge I have to someone else and be okay with the 70. I know Barbara Cochran from Shark Tank is a huge advocate of if you can pay someone to be 80% as good as you are, do that every time.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that's the emotion side, which is understanding people are okay with that. But I think the second part of it is I am doing an exercise right now with Katie where we basically look at what would it look like if I disappeared for a year and 5 years from now, and how does the company not break? And very quickly you get stressed out because you're like, okay, I don't know if it'll last 2 weeks. But what it has forced me to do is look at an actual trajectory plan of what that looks like, because every big digital marketing coach person I've ever hired, they are not the person hitting the nail with the hammer. They're the person looking at the house and telling everyone where to hit the nail with the hammer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's going to be the next growth wave. But I think a big part of it too is the self-work. Like one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot is like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And a big thing when I moved to Cleveland from Akron that I fell off with was like I stopped doing daily journaling. I was still lifting, but I wasn't lifting with my same buddies. So the quality of lifts kind of sizzled down. And I know that's one that you're big in is like, how have you found the ability to, one, sleep more, two, like how does your fitness coincide with business and how do you make those things work together? Because I think that's a challenge a lot of people don't talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. You know, between childhood, between the military, you know, just like some other life events, like I've dealt with a ton of trauma. And what really like grounds me more than anything is like staying active, right? And so when stuff starts getting stressful with the business, you know, it's kind of like this like chicken and the egg, right? So like sleep starts to kind of tank a little bit, then like the work quality kind of starts to tank a little bit, and then you don't have any motivation to get to the gym. And so it's like, all right, well, is that because I haven't been going to the gym that I'm not like feeling leveled and, you know, in like great like place mentally, or am I not going to the gym because of the stress, you know, the other stuff? And so I kind of have to like force myself. I mean,
so it's not easy for you still to this day.
No. I mean, it kind of comes in waves, you know, like we're a few months, I'm in the gym every day. I'll find time. It's easy to find time. I don't have any excuses. And then a few weeks, it's the holidays. So, you know, on top of like some travel and some other things like December, you may as well just
chalk it off.
Yeah. It was not a great month for that at all.
Do you think that the most successful people you've met in business, do they also take care of their physical health?
I think you have to some degree. If it's not your physical health, like, I mean, even just like spiritual, you know, or like mentally, like you have to do something.
Yeah. That's a huge one that it scared the shit out of me, transparently, is I've met a lot of people who make a lot of money, but if you were like, do you want to wake up in their body tomorrow morning? It's a strong no.
Right.
You know, they might be overweight. They might have an addiction that no one actually knows about other than people on their staff. And I think that's something that's been scary for me is it's like, what pace do I choose to grow at? Because I see the redlining route. Like I see the way where it's like, make as much money, live a miserable life, scare every girl away. Like that's an option. But I think the more impressive thing to me is finding people who they actually have time to be with their kids. If you ask their wife, what are they like? They wouldn't say he works too much. And so for me, that's been a huge goal. But I mean, one thing you motivated me to do this year was like, just get your blood work done. Yeah. I mean, that was one thing. Like, what was that like for you? I mean, how old are you now?
40. Turned
40 I was going to say we had the big 40th birthday this summer. So what was that like for you to actually, like a lot of people I know avoid that, to like actually say, I'm going to get the blood work done and let's see where I'm actually at.
When I got that blood work done, I was like, oh, I eat pretty clean. You know, I'm in the gym 4 or 5 days a week. I'm going to be totally fine. Well, it turns out I was pre-diabetic. Like I was very close. Like my A1C was, you know, diabetes is like what, like mid 6s or something. I was like right on the cusp, and I'm like, wow, like.
And you wouldn't know that looking at you. You would just think you're a guy that works hard, goes to gym.
So I mean, it definitely was eye opening. You know, I think that it really makes you think. You know, I have 2 small kids. You know, I have a wife that, you know, like relies on me to help with just the family. I mean, I don't mean like relies on me, like my family relies on me. You know. And it was a good reminder that we're all mortal, you know. I mean, we all like can have health issues, all these things. Because I've been very fortunate. Like, I mean, I've had next to 0 health issues my entire life. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, what does this even mean?
Yeah. And but I think that to all the people that are listening and hear, okay, he did his blood work. Like, how did you even convince yourself to do that? Because like you could have very easily been like, I do go to the gym. I eat semi-healthy, so I don't need to.
I think my wife pushed me to that. Yeah. She's, her family is very big on health and like maintaining all that. And also like, you know, my dad, I mean, he's still around and he has like every ailment known to mankind, you know, and he's early 60s. So, or late 50s. So, it's I'm not saying I'm getting old. I don't feel old, but
it reminds you,
like, you turn 40 and you're like, all right, I probably need to just see what's going on underneath the hood. Like actually, like just do a quick checkup and see.
And where's the parallel to that in business? Because I think that's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. How do you look at those two in the same way? Because I think in the last year since I've known you, you've kind of done that audit on both sides of your life.
Yeah, I mean, with business, you really just have to take a good hard look in the mirror and figure out like, okay, what are my goals? Where do we want to be? And what is like the bottleneck? And it has been my experience talking to other entrepreneurs and also just like kind of auditing like the business side of things that like the leader is typically the bottleneck, And so for us, we are really just like for 2024, really just looking into all of it. Our process, in the beginning, we were growing like crazy, like 40, 50% growth year over year. We've now dropped down to like, I think we're going to finish 2023 about 10% growth, which is good just given the market.
Yeah.
But it's well short of where we wanted to be. We wanted to be at least 30, 40% growth. And so looking back at that, I think got very comfortable. And I think like when it comes to health, when it comes to business, when it comes to your relationship, whatever it is, it's very easy to get comfortable when things are kind of like,
they're slowly going up.
Like kind of on autopilot. And there's a lot of like what we've improved, many of our processes. There are some of the things that we did in the beginning that we're no longer doing now at this point. And so, just doing a good look in the mirror and getting back to the basics of like what made us so successful in the beginning is kind of where we're at.
And so it's a merge of doing what worked in the beginning. So maybe some of the things Hustle Sean was doing, you still have to bring those in, just maybe with less urgency and more systems.
Yeah. A lot of it can be automated at this point.
Yeah.
And so that's really like what we're focusing on.
And so now when you look back on like the best months, because I got to ask this for real, what is the most money a home inspector in Ohio could realistically make in a month?
I mean, if you're just talking, are you talking like by yourself or like?
Let's say you got two guys that'll help you out.
All right. So the best month that we've had as a small inspection team in Northeast Ohio was earlier this year in June. We were close to 60,000. So we were just right there.
And so, okay, yeah, wow, that was higher than I thought you were going to say. But I guess on the other side of it, for everyone watching, like you wouldn't look at the guy who's got, the belt on, walking around the house with a clipboard. Oh, that guy's doing way better than I am. So for all the people that are like right now my age, they're in their 20s, they're working at some corporate job where the title sounds cool, but they're really not actually getting it. Like, what would you say to a lot of those people that are like, maybe I want to take that risk, but I'm a little nervous?
I would say that you just need to keep your mind open to other options and, do a little research, especially in your early 20s. Like that's the time to expose yourself as much as you can. I mean, travel, hang out with, people outside of just your friend group from high school and really just get exposed. I met somebody the other day. He has two kids that are like college age. One's 19 going to a trade school. One is in college and going to be finishing up I believe it was some like business program, but they went two different paths. The 19-year-old just finished at a trade school and got hired with an HVAC company, and he's going to be making probably about $80,000 in year one. The other son is going to school and will probably get an entry-level job with who knows how much debt they'll have for student loans and probably be, I don't know what the going rate is for an entry-level job in business now, but less than 80.
I think a lot of it's less than 50. I mean, the reason I even dropped out was in my junior year, I started looking at the numbers. So I was looking at assuming I got the best job, I was like, what could I make? And when it got really scary is it hit me that the best I could make was not enough to pay off the debt over a 20-year timeline. So I kind of had to look at the mirror and go, okay, I'm in a sinking pit right now. And then I finally started, I actually almost took a solar opportunity. Glad I didn't. But at the time, it seemed like any option out was the option I wanted. Yeah. And now when I look back on it, I think that if so many kids just took a year to stop and think, what do I actually even want to do? I think they would do more things like explore. They might be a home inspector with someone like you for a year and go, maybe this isn't it, but I want to start a pressure washing company. Yep. But I think in the space we're in right now, there's a huge fear to start something new.
I think there's a lot of FOMO, for one. And like with social media, it's funny saying that we're on a podcast, but the world is so accessible and everyone sees the best version of everybody on social media. They don't see all the work that goes in behind the scenes on things, right? Like, so, when you see, especially like with young people, they see these people who are, and real estate is notorious for this. There'll be some guy selling a course or an investor or an agent pulling up in their Lambo, doing all these things. And that is like such a small percentage get to that point. And they didn't just fall into that overnight. And so somebody sees that, they want to say, well, I'm going to get my real estate license. And the other component of that is like the delayed gratification. Like you have to be willing to put in the work and the time to like learn those skills, to be able to be that successful person. Anyone could do it. You just have to be able to know, like what you just talked about, you dropped out of school.
Yeah.
You started a business. Well, you could have stuck out school for another few years and got a job at an entry-level position, making a decent wage. Or you could have started your own company and did the whole thing. Right? So you either were going to stay in school for a few years or you were going to start your own company knowing you weren't going to be super successful right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So you have to choose your
and I think there was almost like this delusion in my head of I would rather eat shit for 3 to 10 years doing what I want than get the pat on the back for something that, like, I had a safe job. For everyone watching this, I was at an agency where I had to sell, I had to manage the clients, and I had to render the service for $10 an hour. And by the end of my second year, I was watching YouTube for 7 hours a day. And for anyone watching this with a tough boss, they'd be like, oh, dude, that's awesome. You made it. Like, that's the definition of depression. Like, it's not fun. You're watching all these other people do these things. And I think for me, I look back on it and I think that the struggle I felt in the beginning is still there. I think it just changes how it looks and it changes what it is. Because when I had, let's say, the first couple of clients and I was doing good work for them, they're giving me referrals, I took on people I shouldn't have taken on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we all experience that as business owners. I mean, for you as an inspector, I mean, you've probably taken on some crazy clients.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it was probably about 3 years ago. Probably not even that long, about 2 years ago, where like we finally got to the point where I was taking on everyone, every client, every agent, and I got to the point where I'm like, man, it is just not worth, it is not worth the headache that goes into this. Like, I already know if it's like, say, this agent, it's going to be a complete nightmare every step of the way. Or if it's a certain client, just based on like the conversation that on an onboarding call, I'm sorry, we're full this week.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just not worth the headache on the back end.
And it's hard to do that when you first, do you remember the first time you had to do that?
Oh yeah.
How hard?
I was terrified because it was like our leading like referral source at that point. And we, there was a problem with one of the inspections we had and they needed an answer. I was still working full time in law enforcement at the time. And it was one of those weeks where I had like no sleep whatsoever and my phone was just blowing up. And she called and eventually was like, if you don't return my call in the next like 10 minutes, we're never doing business together again. And so I called back and I was like, look, I'm full-time in law enforcement. You know that my sleep schedule is crazy. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, but I've not slept in like 2.5 days. This is not okay. If you want to take your business elsewhere, I don't care. And I hung up. And from that point on, it was kind of like, okay, like I was very much in a like vendor to like peer to like vendor relationship. And that turned in more to like a peer to peer, business owner to business owner. And that really helped with like setting boundaries, and establishing that relationship in the beginning.
Yeah, it's hard because, I mean, I think every business will have to, especially a service-based business, you have to constantly audit who are we willing to work with. And I would say I've had 2 phases in my business where I had to be the one to make the decision. Yeah, there's been times where people are like, I don't like the service, I don't want to be on camera, whatever, and they cancel. That's part of it. But the harder part is to kind of what you said, move away from that peer to vendor and just go, hey, listen, we're both business owners. This does not work. And I hope there's no hard feelings, but I can't continue to do this. And it's tough, but I think it also, if you don't do those, you don't get the next best one.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing I've seen. And it's weird how it works out because there's no proof that it is that way. But when you allow that space, I do think it frees it up big time.
Well, that just touches on what we spoke about earlier, in this episode where we were talking about like doing things to avoid pain. I would go to like great lengths to keep these people happy, because I didn't want to have the conversation of, hey, I'm sorry, but like, this does not work for us at all. Like, it's a very one-sided relationship, And now, like, after having a few of those, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, the worst that's going to happen is they're not going to like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I think a lot of times, especially in business, and I think this is a hard gap of I'm a worker and I'm a business owner, you get this idea that this person's going to be with me till I'm in my grave. And, we're going to edit these videos forever, or we're going to inspect every home they have forever. But it's also funny too, just in a short period of time, how much your referral partners can even change.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like for you, I know I've met Sean through several different networking groups, and what's crazy is there is a core group of people that always is doing well. They make it through the market shifts, but it's wild to see even in a 2-year period how many people are in and never heard from again.
Yeah,
and that happens quick.
It happens real quick. Yeah, especially in real estate with how much like how much the market has fluctuated. I don't know what's going to happen in Ohio. I believe it was Illinois or another Midwest state that they did licensing for inspectors about the same time Ohio did. And their first round of renewals was within the last year or two. And the renewal rate was like 57%. So about 40% of the market
is now up for grabs.
Yeah, up for grabs. So,
do you see that being an issue? Do you see I get this a lot, and maybe I'm just grateful that these are the people I'm talking to, but I'll get on phone calls where people don't even know of another competitor of mine they could even call to see if they want to work with them. Like, do you get times where you realize like, oh, we're getting jobs because there's just not enough people in the market to even serve?
It depends on the region. There are some regions where there are just not great inspection companies or like not many options. But no, I mean, I really try and like have that kind of like the mindset you just like spoke of, even though I know it's not the case. I really try and focus on like what our company is doing. We have to pay attention to the competition just to make sure we're pricing somewhat appropriately, things of that nature. What the industry norms are for like what the clients expect based on like what most companies are doing. But generally speaking, I have a handful of friends in the inspection industry that I talk to on a regular basis. I don't pay attention. I mean,
it's not worth it.
There are so many inspection companies out there now. I mean, hey, if you guys want to hang it up, I won't be mad, but, but I mean, I do like very much believe in like an abundance, like mindset.
There's enough out there.
We did in 2022, we did right around 1,000 inspections as a company, and we had less than 2% market share. So that's how much opportunity was still out there for us as a company. I haven't checked 2023 yet. I haven't checked the sales data and all that stuff, but
that is absurd. I didn't know the numbers were like that.
Yeah. So,
all right, I'm gonna hit you with a few rapid fire questions because I'm always curious.
All right.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen during an inspection that you've never told anyone about?
The weirdest thing. Oh my gosh. A few weeks ago, I did an inspection and it was for an investor out of state. And I got there, it was supposed to be a duplex, and the entire house was gutted, except all of these rooms had been built as like individual boarding rooms. So it's rent by the room, not with walls, but with used doors from houses.
It was like Monsters Inc. in there.
Yeah. Or like Or like the way I just was describing to people was like, you've seen like Mad Max, how like the cars are just like patched together. Like the whole house was that way. I mean, pieces of siding and doors is what built the entire home.
Do you think when you're driving around that you can never look at houses the same way since you've been an inspector? Do you just see every flaw when you're walking around?
I can't help it. Yeah. Yeah, I can't help it.
Yeah, guys, when we got in here, Sean was looking around. He had to check the ceilings. You can tell he starts doing his looks. And there's so many I'm curious about. How long do you think it takes someone to actually be able to walk through a house to where they can actually see, okay, I need to fix this, I need to change that? Because it's always amazing to me when we do our video shoots, like I am just focused on you. Yeah. I don't know what you're seeing. And then I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think like for training purposes for my guys, they don't go out on their own until they've completed all their training work, like coursework, and then like a minimum of 100 plus inspections. But I really don't think, like, for me, I'm really ever comfortable. So just in the sense of like, if I'm buying a house myself, I typically have one of my guys go out and do the inspection for me.
Like, are you afraid of bias?
Yeah. Like I'm going to go in there and I'm thinking, okay, I can do this rehab. I can get a tenant in here for this much. If I Airbnb it, I can do this. And I'm not even like focused on, oh, wow, like the ceiling fell down.
Leaking.
Yeah. So I'll normally send one of my guys. So I'm just completely unbiased third party.
Yeah. Okay. Those are my inspection questions. And the last one I'll hit you with is, what are your goals in life for 2024 with the business, with your lifting, and with your family?
2024, business related, I want us to grow 50%. So I was initially like going crazy, 100% growth, all this, but after doing a lot of self-reflection, I think 50% is definitely attainable. It's going to take some work for sure, but 50% growth is the goal there. I'd also like to expand into the Columbus market. So that would go a long way towards, and who knows, we could double or triple business if we expand into other markets. Yeah. Fitness goals, possibly a marathon this year.
Full.
Yeah. I've ran a couple halves.
Full marathon.
Full. Yeah. And, I'm going to do the Murph again. I did the Murph for 8 consecutive years and had a back injury. So
you're getting back to it.
I'm going to do that again. And then family, just health, some travel, and just making sure that, I can spend the quality time with my kids.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any final remarks for the people watching?
If you're in your early 20s and you're thinking about getting into business, I think you should do it. Especially in Northeast Ohio, your family and friends are going to have a lot to say about a lot of opinions, and you've got to make that choice for yourself. Everyone has the best intentions for you. I'm sure, Alex, your family probably wasn't thrilled that you were leaving school to get into business. But even if you don't succeed, you're still going to learn so many life lessons along the way. It's worth it.
Sweet. All right, guys, that's episode 3. I will see you for the next one. How's the timing on that one?